Hi, good day everyone. I am Fatima Ira Evin from Bachelor of Secondary Education, majoring in English 3B, together with my partner, Aljeyo Numugdang. Today, we will be talking about the most fascinating aspects of language and literature, the development in stylistics, or the stylistics. So let's first define what is stylistics. When we say stylistics, this is the study of how language is used to create meaning, beauty, and emotional impact in texts, which it bridges the linguistics and literature. And I will give you an example for it. Instead of saying he died in a specific text or context, a writer might say he went into the silence, and that shift in language, which became poetic, emotional, and symbolic. And that is how the stylistics helps us understand. So first, let's look at what shaped stylistics as a field. First, we have the Russian formalism. So this school focuses on form, how a text is written rather than what it says. So in this particular school, they introduced the concept of the familiarization, or marking the ordinary seem new. And one of the examples of this is, instead of saying blood, a poet might write a crimson liquid spilled, and it forces the readers to pause and think differently. Second, we have the Prague school. So this group emphasized the language, functions, and context. So one of the examples of this is in a novel. So the character might speak formally at work but casually with friends, and that shift shows something about their identity, and that's what stylistics analyzes. So yes, another, we have the Roman Jacobson. So in Roman Jacobson, he introduced the poetic function of language, when language draws attention to itself, not just its meaning. And an example of this is in the line, save soil, save Saul. The repetition of end sound patterns are as powerful as the message itself. And later on, we will know the different functions of language that Roman Jacobson proposed. As what I've said earlier, let's talk about the Roman Jacobson sixth function of language. So Roman Jacobson, he is a Russian linguist who proposed or identified six primary functions of language, and each one focusing on a different aspect of communication. So these are the referential, the emotive, the conative, the phatic, the multilingual function, and poetic function. So in excuse me. So the first function mentioned here is the referential function. So in referential function, it focuses on the context or information itself. For example, let's take a look and give an example here. The sun rises in the east. So here, as you can see, the goal is to provide a factual information, and you'll often find this in textbooks, documentaries, or news. You get it? So second, we have the emotive or expressive function. So Jacobson, he define the emotive function as the one who conveys the speaker's feelings. Example, I'm so frustrated right now. So this function highlights the speaker's emotion, whether it's in personal conversation, vlogs, or even song lyrics expressing pain or joy. Third one, we have the conative function. So in conative function, this is when this is directed toward the receiver, and it often seen in commands or requests. Example, here it's stated, please turn off the lights. So this is a common in advertisements, instructions, or anytime someone tries to influence or direct one person's behavior. Number 4, we have the phatic functions. So in phatic function, it checks or maintains the communication lines, like saying hello or can you hear me? So one of the examples there is, are you there? So it's not about the content. It's about making sure that the channel of communication is open. You should think of a small talk, greetings, or even internet logins. 5, we have the metalingual function. So in metalingual function, it talks about the language itself. Like when we define a word. For example, it says there, when I say organic, I mean grown without chemicals. So this is especially useful in academics settings or conversations where clarification is needed. Lastly, we have the poetic function. So in poetic function, it actually emphasizes the form of message like rhyme, rhythm, or style. In that specific function, the example there was time flies like an arrow, fruit flies like a banana. So, it draws attention to how the message is crafted, not just what it says. You see, this in slogans, you see this kind of poetic function in slogans, poems, or even witty social media captions. So, each function actually plays a role depending on the goal of communication. So, yes. To sum it up, Stylistics helps us see the art in language. It also teaches us how authors are sound, structure, and style to stir emotion and provoke thought. So, F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "So we beat on boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past." So, as you can see in this given final example here, the repetition and rhythm echo the novel's theme of struggle, and Stylistics helps us understand why it moves us. Yun lang. Thank you, and I hope the discussion helps to read the texts not just with our eyes but with deeper understanding.
Understanding about Jacobson poetic function. So in this slide, we explore Roman Jacobson theory of the 6 functions of language. According to Jacobson, every act of communication contains multiple functions, but usually one dominates. Let's briefly go through each. First is the referential function. It's used when language is focused on conveying factual information or describing the world around us. For example, the sun rises in the east gives us objective data. So this is common in the scientific or academic writing. Second is the emotive function. So the emotive function reflects the speaker's emotion or internal state. For instance, saying, "I'm so frustrated right now," tells us more about how the speaker feels than about the situation itself. Third is the connotative function. So targets the receiver directly, like giving commands, requests, or instructions. The example is, "Please turn off the lights." So it's a direct appeal to someone's action. Fourth is the pathic function. So it's about maintaining social connection and checking the channel of communication. Asking, "Are you there?" doesn't seek information. It ensures the listeners is still engaged or present. Next is the metalingual function. So it focuses on the code of the language itself, clarifying meaning. If someone says, "When I say organic, I mean grown without chemicals," they're explaining how a word is used. Lastly is the poetic function. So the poetic function is the focus of our topic. This is where language draws attention to itself, to its form, sound, and structure. It's common in literature, poetry, slogans, or even in witty sayings. For example, time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. Uses wordplay to create humor or rhythm. It's not just what it said, but how it's said that matters. Thank you. So in this slide, poetic function, we zero on the poetic function of language. Unlike other functions that focus on the message or interaction, the poetic function focuses on the form of the message itself. It's about the aesthetic quality of language. There are 2 key elements define this function. First is word selection, the deliberate choice of words for their sound, meaning, or emotional effect. Second is combination of how these words are arranged or patterned. This includes rhyme, rhythm, repetition, or alliteration. So the poetic function doesn't just live in poetry. It appears in songs, lyrics, advertising, speeches, and even jokes. Anytime language is crafted to draw attention to how it's expressed, not just what it's expressed, the poetic function is at work. Hello and welcome to this presentation on stylistic analysis and literature. In this video, we'll explore how language, form, and literary techniques come together to shape meaning in text. Stylistic analysis bridges linguistic and literary criticism, helping us understand not just what a text says, but how it says it and why that matters. We'll break down the concept into 3 parts. An example from poet W. H. Auden, the rule of linguistic form and the deeper integration of style and interpretation. So in section 1, Oden, so let's begin with the leftmost image, an open book showing handwritten text. So this section is labeled as an Oden example, referencing the poet W.H. Oden. One of his lines, "He disappeared in the dead of winter," gives us rich ground for stylistic analysis. So let's consider why this line is powerful. First, the word "disappeared" suggests a quiet, possibly mysterious or solemn event. It doesn't say died directly. It uses a more indirect term which invites interpretation. So the praise in the dead of winter is equally loaded, the dead of winter. It's not just a time, it evokes silence, cold, and lifelessness. Winter often symbolizes death or endings in literature. Stylistic analysis here focuses on choice of words, tone, imagery, and connotation. Oden could have written something simpler, like he died in winter. But his specific wording creates mood, atmosphere, and emotional depth. So now let's move on to the center image, this striking graphic of a sound wave and frequency analysis. The heading says form creates. This highlights how form itself contributes to meaning. So this section explores how structural elements in a text like word placement, rhythm, repetition, and sound patterns connect key ideas. So in the line, "He disappeared in the dead of winter." Notice how. Notice how he disappeared. So it links phonologically and emotionally with dead, enhancing the theme of loss. He plays at the start, foregrounds the subject, and his disappearance remains central. If we were to analyze this with tools like linguistic patterns analysis or phonological graphs, as the image suggests, we'd see patterns like alliteration, repeating consonants, dead of winter, syllabic balance like short clip rhythm that emphasizes finality. These show how form is not separate from meaning. It creates its stylistic as a discipline allows us to quantify these effects, sometimes even using software tools to detect patterns and sound stress and syntax. So, finally, the rightmost image, an open book on a desk, perhaps symbolizing scholarly study. So this section is titled Stylistic Integration and is summarized as linguistic meets literary interpretation. So this is where the real power of stylistics comes. In traditional literary analysis, often focuses on symbolism, themes, and historical context. So linguistic focuses on grammar, phonology, and semantic stylistic integrates both. For example, literary analysis might say this poem is about grief. Grief. Stylistic analysis goes further. The word disappeared implies detachment. The cold imagery in dead of winter mirrors emotional numbness. The rhythm halts, abruptly reflecting the suddenness of loss. And education stylistic analysis trains students to notice the craft of language, not just the content. It teaches close reading, critical thinking, and how to support interpretation with evidence from the text. So in summary, so the conclusion here is that we examine a line from W.H. Oden and how word choices carry emotional weight. We saw how form, structure, rhythm, and sound can enhance meaning. And we explored how stylistic brings together linguistic detail and literary insights to deepen interpretation. Stylistic analysis gives us a lens to appreciate literature. More technically and emotionally, it's not just what a poem says, it's how it's built. So